Okay, so looking around, there have been so many corporate changes, mergers and also kind of breakups and such, that it seems that, like, for certain at least, the big five media conglomerates right now are those five. So Time Warner here, Fox, all the film companies we know, Universal, Viacom would be Paramount. But yeah, okay, so let's get into Comcast, NBCUniversal, Netflix, and the loose clustering approach. So there's a really useful, on 184, a really useful brief history about conglomeration, specifically thinking about NBC, right? Relationship to Comcast, but also GE, all on 184. But what I really appreciate about this section is that it's the first time that we've explicitly talked about the kind of the suggestion system, right? The because you watched, right? And this is something that's so familiar. We look at it every day. We don't think twice about it. It's the first time we've explicitly, I think it's even come up with that wording, right? But the actual function of it, it's probably, and we know for a fact between the algorithms that this is actually like an incredibly sophisticated system. But the intention of this, right, is it's all framed on this idea that these things are loosely related, and there's an assumption that because of that, right, this might be something that you're interested. But it's not just an assumption of who you are, right, as a viewer, which, let's be honest, is so tied into who we are. There's also a kind of directing, right? It's like, oh, you might like this. It's not necessarily that, what I'm trying to get at, if it's clear, it's like, it's not a sort of diagnosis of who you are. There's also a projection of who you might be, right? You are the person that might like this. Maybe we'll direct you this way, right? As opposed to, it's not the same as saying something like, I can't come up with a good analogy. Does that make sense though, right? It's like that they're kind of like trying to steer you as well, because there's the off chance, it's less about like who you are right now and more about like who they want you to be, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at, right? But this goes back to, like what we were talking about last week, and how the sort of package deal, right? That's what a lot of these subscription services are really about, is the fact that there's like a bundle, right? But we're gonna have to stop because I'm gonna have to change the tape. Actually, I lied. We still have like 5 minutes left on the tape. And so this is what Gillen calls it, the library model, right? Like what entices you is what's in the library, right? And in this case, something like a show like Parks and Recreation and The Office, which comes up again, are sort of crucial entries into the library, where it's like, it's like simultaneously there has to be kind of like enough content, but there also has to be, so it's like a sort of, diversity of content. So for example, a lot of people might think when it comes to something like Disney Plus, not like now necessarily, or maybe even now, where it's like, will they have enough, like a plenitude, which goes back to another point where it's like, unlike cable, where the amount of choices and the amount of content that I'm not going to watch is actually a kind of breaking, like a deal breaker, right? In this case, it's like, if it's not enough, it's also a problem. So a library has to have enough content, but also, again, that kind of killer app or the sort of really selling content, right? Like the stuff that, like that's really valuable, like for Disney Plus, it would be like The Mandalorian or the Marvel shows, right? And so on 184, like we get the idea of the custom content cluster, right? See where on 184 that comes in. This is at the bottom of the paragraph. Parks boasts a cast of well-liked and broadly appealing comedians, which enables the sitcom to work exceptionally well as a hub for creating custom content clusters, which means like in this case you take, if there's like a hub, right? So parks and recreation, right? And these are different, let's say the personnel, the actors. A custom content cluster would be like activating that node and then going, so it's like, oh, you might also like this, this, and this, as opposed to a cluster that goes over here. Does that make sense, right? That's how the because you like. And the hope is that this will take you to and more hubs and more nodes, and it just expands. But in the meantime, because you're so busy kind of like you're tracking this, you're staying within the system, right? I really want to kind of emphasize. So this is at the very bottom. That's the because you watched, but in the middle of that final paragraph, Comcast and Netflix speculate that this effective attachment, this is something that we've been talking about in some capacity quite a bit, but this idea of the effective attachment, meaning like affect, emotionally, like what you feel, right? Actually, I'm going to pause because I want to make sure that we have enough time and on the tape to kind of sufficiently talk about this.